I secured $376,000 in US credit as a non-US resident, and it feels like I'm cheating. Now you might be thinking, there is no way that this can happen because accessing that kind of credit and as a non-US citizen seems impossible, right? But it's completely possible for anyone that's a non-US resident, because once I got my hands on my US Amex, I wasn't even making seven figures. I wasn't some top-notch tech founder. I was just a regular business owner from Canada looking for better ways to scale. And let me be crystal clear before we go any further. There's literally a reason why the IRS created the ITIN for non-US citizens in 1997. And if you want to see this, my ITIN is this number over here. It's from the IRS. Everything I'm about to share you in this video is absolutely legal as long as you follow the steps. So in this video, I'm going to break down why I actually pursued a six-figure US credit line, the real reasons behind it, and the actual benefits that I got as a non-US resident. But before we dive in, as a quick disclaimer, this is for educational purposes only. This is in no way a guarantee that you're going to get your hands on $376,000 in US credit. Of course, there are actions that you have to take to get these actual credit limits. So I always advise you to consult with qualified professionals, CPAs, attorneys, and whatnot about your specific situation, because again, everyone's results will differ, or you can just get in contact with my team. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. And so the first reason why I got access to this amount of capital is due to the fact that I was actually very frustrated with the system that I was in. So at a very young age, I ended up getting a sales position with Andrew Tate. Just fast forwarding the whole deal, I dropped out of university, got a 9-to-5 job. I fucking hated the 9-to-5 job. Then I ended up learning about Andrew Tate at a very early age, by the way. Like, this is before he was famous and whatnot. So I got a sales position with him, and I eventually became the sales manager. And I was really young, by the way. Like, I was literally 18 years old, and I was making $55K a month. And eventually I started realizing, wait, in Canada, there's a very high tax bracket. And again, I was not trying to pay six figures in taxes by the end of the year. So very early on, I ended up moving down to Dubai so that I can actually move my whole life there. I literally became a Dubai resident at the age of 19, moved my whole life over there, literally said goodbye to my family and whatnot, and just said, fuck it, I'm going to move over there and whatnot. And so the first reason why I ended up doing this whole deal to access this amount of credit is because I learned that access to capital is something that you need to scale your business. So just fast forwarding on that whole journey in Dubai, I ended up parting ways with Andrew Tate because he was going to jail. There was a lot of different technical things which I don't want to make public, but pretty much I ended up starting my own company, right? I was running an agency helping other influencers build up their personal brand and whatnot, some very well-known influencers that you probably might know nowadays. And so at that point, then I was starting to incur the risks of actually running a real business. So I was spending money on ads. I was spending money on my company. I had some employees. So I was actually taking some real risk at that time. And so the first reason, the big turning point that got me to realize, wait, like just using the revenue of my company to reinvest back into my company was not enough. Access to capital is an important thing when you're operating an actual company. And so I realized that I was revenue rich. I was doing a lot of revenue, but I was actually liquidity poor, so cash poor. I didn't have that much liquidity. And one of the big moments that actually got me moving and said, wait, JP, I gotta change some shit around, is when I actually was at a dinner with some friends that I would always go out with in Dubai. I was actually the youngest person over there. I was like 21 at that time. All my other friends were like in their 30s. I might be a bit weird for this, but again, like my life has been completely different from most people my age. But anyways, pretty much there was one friend at that table. He was in his 30s. He wanted to start a new software company and he had a really good reputation. Like he started a lot of different successful businesses. He exited his own companies and wanted to start a new SaaS company. And so there was 8 people at that table. And he basically said, I'm going to start this SaaS company. I want you guys to be involved in this company. I think it's a really great idea, but we need to access some capital, right? We need to raise some capital for this actual company. And pretty much what ends up happening, he basically asked for 20 grand from each person at that table. And I ended up being the only person that said no to moving forward. So they all got equity. They all bought in. They put 20 grand and whatnot. And fast forward a few years later, all of their investments 10x, I was the only person that did not put money down. And that's what got me to realize that running a business is not only about just recycling money within your own company to then improve and go further in life. It's also about accessing capital. It's also about leveraging a better credit system. So I was looking into the credit system in Dubai and I realized, wait, like I don't have like tons of money like those other friends of mine had. They had huge pools of liquidity, right? Meaning they had a bunch of money, right? I didn't have $1 million net worth at that time. I learned about the credit system in Dubai and I realized very shortly that you can actually go to jail if you default on some of your loans or whatnot. So I was like, dude, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to learn about how the whole entire credit system in the world works and figure out what's the best option for myself. Soon enough, realizing that leveraging a US LLC, getting access to US credit is a good idea. But let's move on to the next reason, which really got me moving and which really compelled me to then access $376,000. So one big issue that I was having when I was using my Dubai-based company, and again, I'm not here to like trash on Dubai. I'm just here to say like, look, you can make some financial moves. Again, you can avoid taxes. You can basically pay 0% taxes, but there's other elements out of the business game that will put you in places of advantage. And I did not know about anything else than you can pay no taxes by moving your life to a different country, right? There's these financial advantages that you can tap into in order to like actually scale your business, right? So at that point, I realized, okay, cool, I need a payment processor. I need to use Stripe. And what I did is I connected my Dubai LLC to my payment processor. And that payment processor, honestly, it was a pain in the ass. I was always getting declines. I was trying to take payments from Europe. I was trying to take payments from the USA. And for some reason, my payment processor was declining a lot of the clients and I was taking cash in AED, right? So their local currency, whereas I'd rather do it in USD and whatnot. So that was not as professional, along with the fact that the payment processor in many instances was getting into issues, right? So I was getting blocked from US credit cards and EU credit cards. And at that point, I was like, wait, I'm already waiting 14 days to get back the cash, right? So if, for example, someone purchases a $10,000 program, I need to wait 14 days to receive the cash. And along with that fact, I'm getting declined with some of these payments. And so I realized, wait, just because I live in Dubai, I don't need to necessarily use a Dubai-based payment processor in the UAE. I can leverage other payment processors. So I was learning about this through some friends that I was ended up connecting with in Dubai. And I'm like, wait, you can open up a US LLC as a pass-through entity, have that Dubai company as your parent company, but that Dubai LLC can receive payments with the payment processor, as well as the fact that you can access credit limits so that you have that cash buffer, right? So you don't need to wait 14 days to receive your cash. You can use your credit cards to, for example, purchase ads, right? Or get inventory and whatnot. And that's something that I started realizing, wait, I can get a better payment processor. It'll take in payments from a lot of different people throughout the world. It's much more trustworthy, along with the fact that I'll get access to credit, right? And so these are just ideas that started coming up into my head. And I'm like, wait, this is starting to look possible, right? Like I can actually do this. And so more and more research started going into learning about the US credit system, but still I ended up just procrastinating this whole thing because I thought this was like a lot of work. I had to go to the US, travel a bunch of times, maybe even change my citizenships. So then moving on to the next reason that actually got me to think, wait, think about this like actually seriously. And that is actually the rewards arbitrage. So at that time in Dubai, I was actually spending about 5 figures on ads, between 5 to 4 figures, low 5 figures, usually 10K a month, something like that. And I was using debit cards the whole time because again, there was no like crazy credit cards in Dubai. And I had my Canadian credit cards, which I actually ended up revoking some of them. I kept the Amex Platinum in Canada and whatnot. But those are minute details. Like I didn't want to have anything in the Canadian system, so I was using Dubai based debit cards. And so I was getting nothing literally for all the ad spend. And so I thought that US credit was impossible until I met a few friends when they were actually visiting the country that were leveraging US credit cards to actually spend money on ads. And I'm like, wait, how the hell did you do that? Wait, there's an actual process to this. You can access capital, but not only that, access better rewards. And so I was starting to do the math. I went onto the Canadian sites on Amex, as well as the US sites on Amex. I was making comparisons. I thought that accessing an American Express Platinum or an American Express Gold in Canada was the same as doing it in the US. Same thing with if you're in Australia or in the US or in London or in Europe versus the US. Soon enough realized that credit systems in different countries are absolutely different. That's why I ended up pursuing this crazy credit limit that I have nowadays, because of all of the different discoveries that I made over time, right? So I learned that I can technically be earning 5 figures worth of rewards on a yearly basis just due to the fact that I've got the right credit card. And at that time, like, I literally traveled to 30 plus countries. I traveled to Thailand, I traveled to Romania, I traveled to Spain, Portugal, Warsaw, in Poland, Dubai, as well as in Oman and whatnot. And I took a lot of flights by having a debit card, literally paying full price for economy, while some of my friends were paying half the price going in business class. But I didn't realize that until this one thing happened. And this was the real reason why I was like, fuck this shit. I'm going to access US credit. I need to figure this shit out. And so what happened is, after a few months, I end up in Warsaw, Poland. And I had a friend's birthday party that I had to attend in a few days' time. My friend literally called me. He's like, yo, are you going to show up to the party? And this was in Toronto, right? So I was in Warsaw. It was happening in Toronto. And I was like, wait, what party? And he's like, wait, the party in like 2 days. And he's like, dude, you've got to be here. Like, this is a really important thing for your friend. And I really wanted to be there. So I ended up just rushing down to Google Flights, trying to book a flight. And I saw 1.3K to book a flight from here in Poland, where I was, back to Toronto. 1.3K for economy. Like, crazy, right? And then $10,000 for a business class flight. Because it was so last minute, they like jacked their prices like crazy. And so I'm like, wait, am I really gonna get scammed by the airports, by these travel guys? Or am I gonna try to do this the right way? So I ended up just like sitting back, because this happened a lot of times where I would book flights and I'm like, they really just took a bunch of money from me. Like, because they always change their prices on the travel portals and whatnot. And it's just super annoying. Like, I paid like crazy amounts for some like economy flights during my time. And I'm like, wait, I'm not going to get scammed again, paying 1.3K just to go one way back home. So I ended up going and meeting my friend Gio in Warsaw. And I knew he was a US guy. He was like younger than me. He was like 20 years old. And he was actually staying at the Marriott Hotel at one of like the top suites. So I ended up going to his place because he told me that he was like big into credit. So I wanted to like ask him for some recommendations before I actually booked this actual flight. And so I go to his place and I tell him, hey, Gio, like I'm about to like spend like 1.3K to go back home. And he was like, wait, JP, are you seriously telling me that you're going to pay 1.3K to get on economy on a one-way ticket? And I'm like, yeah, well, I have no other options. Like, I checked all the options. And he was like, JP, you've got to learn a bit more things about the travel system, the point system. And so I basically sat down with him for the next 2 hours learning about how this whole points credit system looked like, and my whole entire mind just exploded. Because at that point, I traveled to 30 plus countries, like literally like 50 plus different airplane flights, and I realized that I was technically scamming myself because I did not learn about the US credit system. So he ended up saying, JP, I'll book your first flights. I'll pay it for myself because I've got a bunch of points and I've already got a company. I'm spending money on ads. I've already got like a 7 figures worth of points. So I'm going to pay for this flight going back home. He ends up putting me on a business class seat back home for $1,000 worth of points for the next day. Crazy. Insane. Because what he did was he leveraged transfer partners and whatnot, moved some points around, and ended up literally paying $1,000 worth of points to actually get me on a business class flight. Again, like the business class flight was $10,000, right? So that was just insane. Like my mind exploded. I was like, whoa, what the hell is this, right? So that was really the breaking point that I had to realize, because this guy was younger. He was making less revenue than me, but he was leveraging the US credit system with all its flexibility and whatnot to actually travel and basically save money by having the right credit cards, right? A lot of people think about US credit as like, oh, you have high annual fees. But again, as a business owner, if you're spending money on ads, regardless, you're spending money on your business, it makes sense, right? So yeah, and then after that, the last reason was the fact that he not only had access to better credit cards, but he also had access to $250,000 in business funding, right? So he was actually doing business funding for other clients at that point. He had $250,000 at the age of 20. I was like, how in the hell is this system real? Right? I was a Canadian. I was living in Dubai. I didn't even understand that that was something that was possible at 0% interest in the USA. It's just that by being raised in an economy that's not super capitalistic, a bit more socialist, let's say, or whatnot, not being raised in the biggest economy in the world, you're not cognizant about all of the financial advantages that you get by being a business owner in America, right? And so at that point, I ended up trying to figure out this whole deal, got some tips and tricks, started introducing myself to different representatives at American Express, at Chase and whatnot, started building up my network of different contacts that I have inside of this US credit system. And I started learning about the ITIN and how this is actually possible, how non-citizens can leverage a US LLC to unlock all of the different financial tools that non-citizens typically do not have. So that is access to higher credit limits, access to higher rewards, right? So better rewards for every dollar that you spend, and payment processors, banking, and whatnot. And so after that, the journey was basically about properly timing the next credit card approvals, utilizing my relationships, my network to actually get this level of credit limits, right? So $376,000 that I've got between Amex, between Chase, and all of the different bankers that we have contacts with. That's how we were able to get that much in approval specifically. So now that you know why I secured $376,000 in US credit, you're probably wondering where you fit all to this. It's simple. The one question you have to ask yourself is, are you spending more than $10,000 per month on your business? If not, the reality is that the math doesn't add up to access US credit. And I would highly recommend joining our free community so you can take the first few steps, like getting your ITIN, maybe setting up your corporation, getting a few business bank accounts. But if you are spending more than $10,000 a month, then I'd like to share you this video over here, which will actually break down on a calculator how much you're actually losing by not having access to the American credit system. And this is real math based on the redemptions that you will get. And the reason why we say $10,000 a month in spend is because that's the inflection point where you're actually losing more money than not having access to this credit system. So stop leaving money on the table, click this video, and I'll see you in the next one.